my opinion of that sacred geometry is that it allows you to put on your fifth dimensional garment, whether you've earned it or not. And that's very powerful because it allows you to tap into a higher aspect of yourself. Every one of us is 5D. Every one of us has a 5D self or a higher self. And what we're doing in this reality, this go, is to merge the higher self with the 3D self to become the enlightened human.
Guy here. My beautiful guest today is Maureen St. Germain. And the one thing I've found on my own journey is that as I've lent into more of this inward journey, if you like, through the retreats, through the workshops we hold, the things that we do, and in my personal practices, I'm astounded how much things continue to open up, and it blows my mind. So remaining open and curious has been one of the things I continue to practice. And the more I learn, the more questions I have. So today we tackle topics of the Merkaba, the flower of life, higher self, these esoteric concepts that can feel so out there if we're not familiar with this kind of work. And I wanted to bring somebody on to start grounding it, or I could have a grounded conversation around it and see how we can actually start to learn about these things more and apply these things in our lives. And I hope I've done that for you guys today when you listen to this podcast. I really enjoyed talking to Maureen. She's clearly been very passionate about this work and has been looking into this herself for a very long time. Anyway, please let me know if you're in YouTube or whatever, where you are in the world, if you enjoy this conversation. And hit me up in the comments below. And of course, I hope to meet you one day in person somewhere at one of our live retreats or events. Much love from me. Enjoy this podcast, and I will see you soon. Maureen St. Germain, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Nice to be on the other side of the world at the same time. Yeah,
I'm always fascinated when I turn the camera on because it's the first time we've met today. And, and after doing many guests, you never know what the commonalities are or things like that. Instantly, you spotted my biogeometry and you're like, oh, you're wearing biogeometry. I know Dr. Ibrahim, and you've done the courses and everything. And it's like, wow, it's a small world. Small world indeed.
Yeah.
So my first question to you is that you actually mentioned you might be coming to Australia next year. So if you were on an aeroplane coming to Australia and you sat next to a complete stranger and they asked you what you did for a living, what would you say?
I would say I'm a spiritual teacher and I help people wake up. I help expand their awareness. Sometimes I tell a story. It's a little bit like this. If you were in a world where we'd move way beyond the time we are in now, and people had lost the ability to understand cars or gasoline, and I show up and I would show you how to make gasoline and how to make the car that's sitting in the back 40, how to make it run. And then you could go further than you can if you're just walking. So it's the opportunity to expand and make your life better.
Yeah, beautiful. I got to ask you, how would you define waking up? Because you stop anyone on the street, they'll say that I'm awake. Like, the ego gets in the way, certainly before my awakening, I thought I had everything in the bag in some respect, in my mind anyway. How would you define it?
I would define waking up to someone who is suddenly given knowledge that they had no idea existed. So the best example I can give you is when a child learns about sex education. 1 minute they're innocent, and then the next minute they're discovering that mommy has a baby in her tummy. And, that information slowly comes in. Well, they might not even ask until many years later, well, how did the baby get in there? And how's the baby going to get out? Those kinds of things. Right now, all you're noticing is this one thing. So it's a little bit like that, because I believe the world we live in is much more vast than what we have been taught or what we've been led to believe collectively. And it's pretty obvious to me. I grew up Catholic, and I reached a point where I recognized that there was way more in life than what I was being taught. And it didn't mean that what I was being taught was bad or wrong. It's just that I could expand my view and include more things. And in my early years as a teen, I was into Edgar Cayce. My mother gave me a book on Cayce. And Edgar Cayce also was a very strict Christian in that era. And he did not believe in reincarnation, for example. But when his own reading said that he had been, in the healing arts and had been working in the temples, he came to accept that he did believe in reincarnation. But it took him some adjustment.
How does a teen even end up getting into Edgar Cayce? Because I look at my journey as a Welshman growing in the valleys of Wales. I didn't even know what yoga was in my teens, let alone Edgar Cayce. Do you know what I'm saying?
I was fortunate.
Were you already kind of spiritually set and you were off? So none of this was like, oh my God.
I think that's true. I tell people that I believe I was born awake. And it did help that both of my parents were plugged in. My mother knew where my father was when he was a prisoner of war in World War II. And she often read my mind. And I was one of 6 kids. So, it was a big Catholic family. And my father also was very gifted and knew things. He wasn't very vocal about it. But both he and my mom went to a Jose Silva training when I was in my 20s. They brought me a book signed by Jose Silva.
That's the Silva method, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. When Jose Silva was still alive. So I grew up in an environment that was very allowing and very accepting. And from the time I can remember, I knew I was being watched. And I didn't see it as, I saw that there were both benevolent and non-benevolent watching me. So I was aware that whatever I did or thought was important, and I paid attention. And I knew things that nobody else knew. So,
wow.
Yeah. And so I was very fortunate to have the Cayce material in my world. And I've continued to be involved in the Cayce organization. So that's really continued to grow. But my primary growth, I think, came when I learned the Merkaba, the Flower of Life work. And that was when I was ending a marriage. And so I was in a really challenging place as far as personally goes. But I was open because I was hurting. And this is something a lot of people don't realize, is that when you go through a traumatic experience, whether it's losing a job or losing a spouse or a breakup or a job, you're very vulnerable and you're very intense and emotional. And that emotion is a portal to take you higher if you let it. And think of the people we know of who've been through trauma. Some people come through with flying colors and they seem to elevate up, and others go into the poor me. So when we have those crises, it is what I call a blow to the heart. And I wrote about that in the Beyond the Flower of Life book on what a blow to the heart is. But it's where someone is does something that you thought they knew better, and they don't even think they've done anything wrong. So that's a blow to the heart. And the same is true when you lose a job or anything like that. it's a blow, and that blow causes you to either cover up and bury it, or it can cause you to open up and accept more about life.
Yeah.
And what can I learn from this experience? Yeah.
So leaning into you mentioned the flower of life and the Merkaba is where you really kind of started to dive in. Did it take you? So before that, were you just kind of aware that you had these gifts, but not really doing anything with them per se?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
I had study groups from the time I was on my own. And, we would take a book and have a study group. So I learned many, many things at a very early age. And this is true for anybody. In America, you can go into a bookstore and say, I bought this book here and I'd like to lead a study group on it. Is there a space I could do that? And very often there is. And they're happy to have you do that because it brings people in, you see. So I was very fortunate. I read a lot of books. I continue to read a lot of books. And what's interesting is when you read a lot, it opens you up to perceive the world in a way that you had not perceived before. When I was first, a group of beings called the Lords of Time came through me, and they started teaching me about time and timelines and multiple versions of each of us. And then I started meeting other versions of me. And also I met other versions of each other, of other people. So because I was traveling and I was when I started out teaching the Merkaba, I was in a different city every single weekend. And I would teach 3 classes. I would teach the Merkaba. I would teach an advanced Merkaba. And then I would teach a manifestation course based on sacred geometry, all of it on sacred geometry. And so you meet so many people. And I have taken, more than 15 trips to Egypt with groups, and I'm planning on doing more again with another group. And I'll give you an example of other versions of yourself. I had 2 men who had both taken classes from me, one in Seattle, one in New York City, both born in Tokyo, but now living in the States, sign up for my Egypt trip. Well, they were both Japanese, no point in putting them with other people, so I put them with each other. But I knew instantly that they were other versions of each other. They were the same soul, different expressions. And this is a concept like, oh my God, I got to share my soul with somebody else. But the other side of it is that means I get to do twice as much. Quit worrying about that stuff. So I didn't tell them that I thought they were the same soul, but they were familiar with my teaching, and they came to me and said, we figured out we're the same soul. And one was short and petite, kind of like that style of Japanese body. And then the other man was kind of muscular and tall and, had that kind of Japanese body. Very interesting. Wow. And I could go on and on with those kinds of stories. And some of them are in the books.
Yeah. You've opened up so many loops now. I'm like, which direction do I go in? Because all of a sudden I'm like, well, because the higher self is something I want to tackle as well. And with the souls that you spoke of. So let's just go there for a moment, and I'll go back to the flower life of Merkaba and break that down if that's okay. But so what do you say? It's because I kind of look at myself as like a nerve ending to consciousness, or my higher self, or my soul. How would you describe the higher self? Is there multiple versions of ourselves playing out then, having like tentacles from a hand or fingers from a hand? Having
I think that's a good description. Yeah. And so we have the oversoul, that's kind of the main deal. And then we have many aspects coming through the oversoul that are the same soul. And they sometimes look alike. They sometimes don't. Now, as far as the higher self goes, another version of me would have the same higher self. if that makes sense. So the higher self is the part of you that's plugged into source, but it's also plugged into you. So it knows what you need to know, knows about what you care about because it's plugged into you, but it's also plugged into a vast knowledge base. You know, I have some amazing stories. And some of the highlighting stories I've told many times, and hopefully our audience today, they'll find them new. One in particular, when I was still working in the corporate world, and I was teaching, even though I was still working corporate because I had a family and kids in college and stuff like that. But I was trying to reach this reporter. My job as a fundraiser was to promote the organization. I was director of development and, you know, get publicity for my agency so we could get more donations. And I'd been trying to reach this reporter all day with no success. So at 5 minutes till 5, my higher self came in and said, call the reporter. And I said, no, I'm not calling him. It's time to go home. I've got kids to feed. I'm hungry. Call the guy. No, I'm not calling the guy. I'm tired. I want to go home. Call the guy. Now I tell everyone, when you first learn to work with your higher self, for 45 days, you're not allowed to say no. If you ask, you have to do it. But in this case, my higher self was addressing me. Now I wasn't addressing my higher self. And we can talk about how that works in a minute. Anyway, I called the man and he answered the phone and he said, Maureen, how could you possibly know I would be here at this time? And all I could do was laugh because I didn't particularly think he would understand that my higher self had told me to call him. Okay. So that's the first part. The best part is the fact that the next day, my story made the front page, on the very top of the front page, above the announcement that the Pope was coming to town. And it was the largest newspaper in the state.
Wow.
That's the higher self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you distinguish then, like, you know, what I found, I had to have experiences to open me up to go, oh my God, there's got to be more to this. So, you know, and part of the podcast, like you say, it keeps me open. It's very similar to reading books. I'm having conversations like this constantly. And it's just always not challenging me, but allowing me to grow in thoughts and ways that it didn't even occur to me. And how do you know that there's an oversoul and a higher self? Like, just for people listening to this, I have not had any direct experiences that this is the way it kind of evolves and works.
I ask questions. You know, I'll give you another example that has to do with time and the fifth dimension and the third dimension. Initially, many things in my world would disappear. You know, my favorite crystal, maybe the car keys, maybe a pair of sunglasses, and they would just flat out disappear. So then I'd grab another pair of sunglasses or I'd get the spare keys. And I asked, where were my keys? Where were my sunglasses? And I was told where they were. And then I would, if I didn't get an answer right away, I'd say, I'd like them back. And I would calm down by asking for it to come back. And then I'd open the drawer that they were supposed to be in and they were right there on top. So one day I was with one of my kids and he came home from school and he was talking about some big thing that had happened. And he said, here, I want to show you what I mean. Now he had thrown something in his book bag and left it in front of the piano, walked into the kitchen, tells me this story and then says, here, I want to show you what I'm talking about, Mom. And I follow him back into the living room. I saw him put whatever it was in his backpack. So it had full awareness. It's not there at all. And by now he's had everything taken out of the backpack. And I said, oh, just put everything back. We'll ask for it to come back. Why don't you come back in the kitchen and we'll finish your story. So that's what we do. We then go back to the backpack and the item he wanted to show me was right on top. This time, instead of asking where his stuff was, because obviously it was still there, I asked, what is going on? What is going on? And what I was told was, Maureen, he was in a higher dimension when he put it down. And when he got worked up on the story, he dropped down to 3rd D. And then when you made it peaceful and you gave him space to tell his story, he came back in and it was right there. So if I'm doing it, my kids are doing it, you're doing it too. Everybody's doing it. They just don't know they're doing it. They think something is wacky. They think there's little gremlins or elves or something that are taking their stuff and then bringing it back. And that's not what's happening. We are literally shifting dimensions. So how do I know things? Partly it's because I'm plugged in, but I'm plugged in because I meditate, and I'm plugged in because I came in with perhaps a direct line to source, and I have grown that. You can come in with a talent, but if you don't work it, I meditate every day for an hour. Sometimes longer. Sometimes I set my alarm for an hour and then I turn it off and then I get up when I'm done and it's 2 hours, so that's one thing that's really important, to get up early and do some quiet meditation. I also do a lot of guided meditations, and I wrote a lot of guided meditations, and I have an app for people on their Android or iPhone that they can download all these wonderful guided meditations. Because when I started out, I had monkey mind and I couldn't concentrate. So going back, how do I know? I want to keep focusing on that. So initially I observed something, and instead of saying, well, that's weird, or the kids must have taken all the cookies. Instead of doing all that, I asked the question, what's going on? And I want to do a little English lesson right now and say there are 6 interview questions. Who, what, why, when, where, how, and when. Okay? So we have all these questions. Every one of them, except the what question, asks so you can solve it. Where are my keys? Why are the cookies gone? When did the kids eat that snack? Okay? All of that is so that I can fix it, so I can lock the cookie jar, or so that I can go find the kid that ate all the cookies and didn't share. It's so I can solve the problem at the ego personality level. But the what question is completely open-ended, and it lets spirit tell us what's really going on. And that, coupled with a regular meditation practice or a sincere desire to know, boom, the answer just floats in. So that's how I know.
Yeah, gotcha. And it is, isn't it? Like the key is, like you say, having a regular practice to sharpen your source, so you can start to differentiate the difference between when you're in your mind and when you're fully present in the moment and with more heart awareness. That's what I found, for sure.
But I do
please.
teach people how to get their higher self connection going. Go ahead. What were we going to say?
Well, I was going to rewind it back to the Merkaba and the flower of life, because they feel, I remember hearing those concepts for the first time and I was like, what? Like, it felt such a stretch. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I can't even keep up with my chakras, let alone let's dive into a Merkaba and flower of life. They felt so esoteric. And as I continued to just stay open, these conversations and topics seem to be coming in more and more, So I'd love to know if you could give a broad overview of what attracted you to that, to learn on your journey, and then what they are.
The flower life itself, I didn't know about, and I saw a poster in my Qigong center. And then I saw it in the Sedona Journal of Emergence, which I had been subscribing to. And somewhere along the line, I saw a third announcement. And I said, all right, I get the message. I need to take this class. So I didn't know what it was when I first chose to take the training. But again, nothing felt foreign to me. And I have been, I don't want this to sound like I'm bragging, but I've been able to spot a lie. I've been able to feel when people aren't telling the truth. And so when I learned all the things that they teach in that class, I didn't find anything that I didn't agree with, that I couldn't swallow, or that frightened me. And because I was teaching it every single weekend, if you can imagine traveling to a different city in America every single weekend for years and then showing up at your corporate job. So I was so immersed in the work every weekend, you know, it created in me a reservoir of knowledge, truly, because I would get a lot of information either in the class or near when the class was held, you know. For a little while I was working as a lobbyist, and I would, on my planes outbound, I would work on my Flower of Life knowledge base and research and, you know, prep. And on the way home, I'd work on my political briefs. You know, I had to create a how am I going to control all this data that's coming in? Yeah, so that's what I did. So, it is important. I think it's the most important thing for people to learn is how to connect with your higher self and then ask your higher self, is it in my highest and best good to take this action? Because when you do that, your higher self is going to show you what your highest and best choice is. And I like to tell people, you know, do your research, do your homework first, and then ask. And let that be the last question you ask. And it's very curious because people want to use it for prediction. And it can be used for prediction, but not right away. And mostly it's not for prediction. It is for your divine action steps. Like, for example, you start out, you know, teaching things, but at some point you made a decision to go into a podcast. How did you know? How did you know?
How you asking me? How did I know?
Mm-hmm.
I just knew it was innate in me. I got drawn to it. Like that's all I follow. I don't really do business plans or cast too far ahead. I allow myself to be guided. And I kind of done that my whole life. I just didn't know what I was doing for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. I understand, you know? Because that's how I've lived my life too. And it's very intriguing because we are on the precipice of doing things the male way and the shift to doing things the female way. And the female way is exactly what you just described. And those that know business planning struggle with that, you know, accepting that. But at the same time, for example, I have business people who call me and asking about people as potential board members or people who might be employees. So they know that there's more knowledge available to them than what meets the eye. So yeah, you know, I have done exactly what you did. I've always followed my guidance. Yeah. So
how,
go ahead.
Yeah. So how would you describe then the Flower of Life and the Merkaba if you were guided to learn that and teach it? And for the layman, for somebody that's not heard of it before.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Merkaba itself is a field of energy that you turn on that sits around your body. I'm looking around my desk here to see where a star tetrahedron is. You can see the one in the back. That's a star tetrahedron. And I was pretty sure I had one sitting here, but I don't see it.
It's like 2 3-dimensional triangles.
Tetrahedrons, right? Right. Yeah. So
trying to describe it for people listening on audio.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. A little bit hidden. So, I see. You're trying to describe it. So it's a tetrahedron. So it's a shape like this, which is like a 3-sided pyramid, but it's really 4-sided because it has a base that counts. So you have 2 of these, and they're nested equidistant from each other, so that at any point in the center, you could reach the same edge. So this point and this point, the upper tetrahedron and the lower tetrahedron are the same distance from the center. So they're equally set up. So in this shape, if you saw it in 2D, you'd say it was a Star of David. But in 3D, it is called a Merkaba. But technically, it's not a real Merkaba until you turn it on. And the actual Flower of Life training is the training that activates the Merkaba and puts it to use for you. And I had been studying esoteric knowledge, I don't know, most of my life, and, even in my teens. And when I learned the Merkaba, it doubled everything instantly. So my opinion of that sacred geometry is that it allows you to put on your fifth dimensional garment, whether you've earned it or not. And that's very powerful because it allows you to tap into a higher aspect of yourself. Every one of us is 5D. Every one of us has a 5D self or a higher self. And what we're doing in this reality, this go, is to merge the higher self with the 3D self to become the enlightened human. We know all the mystics, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, they all embodied the expression of their most evolved self. That's the higher self. Once you become your higher self, then of course there's other layers you can grow to. But right now, as a human, we're looking at how can we become more plugged in. And I like to say that our spirituality is way behind our technology. And now we're catching up.
Yeah, that's a good example. Can I ask you a question on that? Just from my own experience. So I got like an open-ended question here. But when I had my awakening experience, I felt all my chakras, energy centers, whatever you want to call them, really come alive. Like I felt all of them move, all of them connected. The energy travels through my spine. And the next thing I know, I felt energy coming out the top of my head. I felt it coming out of my hands. And I was sitting in this field of energy, and I was plugged into something that it was terrifying and exhilarating all at the same time. And that field of energy, I know I work with on a daily basis. But in my mind, when I'm starting to learn about the Merkaba, I'm like, well, is that the Merkaba? Or is the Merkaba beyond that I'm sitting in? Like, how would you describe it?
Well, I'll start by saying there are people who can turn on their Merkaba spontaneously. The awakening that you experienced was the activation of your chakras and the Kundalini moving up. Mm-hmm. And energy of the Kundalini moving up causes the crown to expand and become receptive. And then that field of energy that you create is a little bit like a torus that it loops around your body. Now, the Merkaba itself is the fifth dimensional vehicle, body of light, if you will. And so when you learn the Merkaba, you're activating a more evolved expression of you that allows you to see, hear, and know as if you're fifth dimensional. Yeah. And generally act as if you're fifth dimensional. So what you're doing is very similar. There is not just one road to enlightenment. So the Merkaba is one of the roads to enlightenment. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, thank you. I'm just drawn to it. I want to.
Did you ever learn the guided meditation based on this?
No.
Okay.
No.
So there is a guided meditation, and it's called the Flower of Life training. And I have the Merkaba training on video, so people can just watch, stream it. And it's in one of my classrooms. So it's on our website. It's a small fee for it. And, the class, teaches you breathing techniques, mudras that you will use, and visualizations that you will use. It takes about 5 minutes to do, takes about a day, 2 days to learn. And what it does is elevates everything. So no matter what other practices you are doing, whether you're a chanter or whether you are, no matter what your practice is, what your current practice is, it will elevate it and give you more profound information and insights. The Merkaba itself is a manifestation field. So it means that your thoughts are going to manifest faster than they would if you weren't wearing an activated Merkaba. The activated Merkaba stays in place about 48 hours for most people. You do this 5-minute meditation every day so that if you skip a day, it's not the end of the world. Your body knows that it's supposed to do it, and it does. At some point, that becomes permanent. When it becomes permanent, most people don't need to do it anymore. I was told by my guides to keep doing it for another 8 years. And I did that meditation every single day for 8 years, over 8 years. I lost track at 8 years, but I think I was told to do it like that because of the teaching that I was doing. I traveled all over the U.S. for, close to 20 years. And I say U.S., but I really mean the world. I was the first one to bring it to many countries. Yeah, it's very exciting work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you can check out our website. And it's under courses and it's set up in lessons. So it's all organized and done for you. You just show up and take the lessons and practice. And
I'll definitely check it out. I'm intrigued. That's for sure.
And then the other thing that's related to this is the higher self connection. And we were told to ask our higher self. Back then, we were told we did not have permission to activate our Merkaba without getting our higher self to tell us it was okay. But there was no training on how to know your higher self. And so you could think that your higher self had given you permission, but how would you know for sure? And so I asked my higher self to show me a way to know my higher self better. And that's this very simple, easy protocol that it's called the higher self connection, and is hugely powerful. And I get letters from people all the time saying how amazing it is and how grateful they are that they learned it. So, and it's on the app. So if you look at your phone, it's the Illuminate app, and it's a purple, box. The whole box is purple with a gold arrow that's got a little bit of a curve to it to imply the phi ratio,
Okay.
And so I could see all of these connections between this meditation and the body and the physics that I knew about and the physics I could learn. And it was astounding because it all matches so incredibly. Yeah. So the Merkaba then is a series of 17 breaths that most people finish within 5 minutes. And so once you learn it, it's a piece of cake to do it every day. And I do have several guided meditations. I have it in a couple of languages that walk you through it. And even I prefer to listen on the app to the meditation and follow it rather than just do it from memory. I can do it from memory, obviously, because I've been teaching it for so long, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Can you activate the Merkaba too soon on your journey then, or not? Or
well,
is it just
in the early
enhance
years,
your experience?
Mm-hmm. In the early years, it was not in the reality. And this is something people don't understand. But if we don't have a consciousness space for it, it's very hard to maintain anything, So when enough people were doing it, then the green light was given that you could activate your Merkaba without getting permission. But I learned it so long ago. I learned it back in 94. That's 30 years ago. 30 years ago. And we were not permitted to activate till we had permission. And what started me on that journey of the higher self connection was I got a call from one of the guys in the class, and he said, did you get permission from your higher self? And I thought, yeah, I think I did. And then he said, so did you activate? And I said, no, because I was not sure. Right. And then he said, why not? And I couldn't give him a good reason. And I thought, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And it became one of the things that I became so well known for, because nobody has a protocol that's logical and systematic that'll give you this level of accuracy. And I do tell people it's 100% accurate.
Yeah. Amazing. Mm-hmm. So as we lead into the tail end of the podcast, I just want to touch on then 3D, 4D and 5D reality and get your take on it. Because everything we're doing right now, like you said, in 94, if somebody watched this podcast, or if they'd think we were a pair of Fruit Loops probably, right? But now it's very acceptable. People are opening up continuously to this work. So there's clearly shifts going on. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work that bit out. But there's a lot of noise and conversation also happening of what is happening on this planet. So I'd love to hear your perspectives of what you feel is happening.
So, third dimension is the reality, it's polarity, and it's the reality we chose to play in order to expand our experiences, dive deep into our emotions, and really expand the database to descend from source, a place of bliss, and experience things that would challenge that. In that process, humanity has gone far enough, and source is basically reeling that fish line back in. So this cycle of polarity is ending. The fourth dimension is the transition zone. I joke around that it's like Grand Central Station in New York City. Nobody goes there to spend the night, or it's like an airport. So I see fourth dimension as a portal between time and space. And it's the transition zone that takes you where you want to go. It also has polarity, and you can get stuck there. There are movies that were written about this kind of thing. They don't label it that way. But when you see a movie like that, there was a movie with Robin Williams where I think it was What Dreams May Come. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And he rescues his wife from the self-imposed purgatory that she'd put herself in. Fourth dimension is that quasi place that you find yourself when you've got a lot of emotion. And remember at the beginning of the podcast, I said, when you have a lot of emotion, it's easier to expand and grow. And the reason for that is the fourth and fifth dimension are very close. And so when you're in a high vibe state, remember there's polarity. So you could be high happiness, high emotion of happiness, or high emotion of sadness. And the sadness would lead to depression. The happiness would lead to fifth dimension. And that place is very tenuous. It vibrates faster in fourth dimension. The vibration of energy, time, and space are all much faster. And then in fifth dimension, what we see is a leveling off of awareness that we are God, that we are divine beings, and that divine essence knows no lack. And as soon as we know there's no lack, we quit being the way we are. We quit being crabby. We quit being angry. We quit being worried. We quit being scared. Because if there's no lack, it's like you have a new baby. There's no lack of sleep in your house. The way to get around that, you ready? Is when you go to bed at night, you make the statement, I am, no matter what the night brings, I will wake up well rested and refreshed. So even if you're up in the middle of the night with a baby, walking the baby, whatever, all those things happen. Then you go back to bed, you know that you're going to wake up well rested, refreshed, and ready to start the day. And that little prayer changes who you are. And if you really notice, and you might be because you're a guy that's really plugged in yourself, when you get out of bed, a lot of people, they sit up in bed and then they sit there for half a second, maybe put their slippers on, but they just kind of pull themselves together. And it's at that moment that you actually feel yourself, I feel pretty good. I feel amazing. That's pretty cool because I was up half the night. And the other thing is stop keeping track. So you don't tell yourself, oh my God, I was up for 3 hours with that baby. Instead, you say, I was up for 3 hours with my darling baby. I'm so happy to have that time with him or her.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
I'll definitely be doing that. I'll definitely be doing that. So with that shift that is happening then, if Earth, like consciousness is reeling it in, we're moving to 5D, whether as a human we like it or not.
Yes. I often say that because I think it's funny. You're going to be 5D whether you're ready or not.
So what happens to people if they are not ready? So, you know, all those things that we've been pushing aside, that we've never, thrown in the closet. I'm not looking at that. Forget about it.
Mm-hmm. That's well said. What I have been shown is that there's 3 Earths: the crash and burn Earth, the people who absolutely refuse to step into their God self and their evil people. Then there's the do-over Earth, and that's all the people that are like you just described. And then there's the ascending Earth. Those are all the people who are opening up and ready to expand and grow and discover who they really are, discover their true heritage. The do-over Earth and the ascending Earth will be allowed to interact for 3 generations. And they've already started that. So we maybe have 2.5 generations left to go. And what I expect will happen is the do-over Earth and the ascending Earth will become one.
Okay.
And it's a very simplified version of what I see happening, but it helps people understand. And to add to that, I would like people to understand that if this is a game and someone's cheating in the game, okay, they're not going to be allowed to play with you anymore. They get fouled. You know, if you're in a basketball game and somebody does a move they're not supposed to, they have to take a foul. They have to step out of the game. And that we don't have to worry about whether they're punished or not. That'll take care of itself. And not to think, okay, they're going to suffer too. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about it's the privilege of being in the game that matters, not what happens in the game. And we're all kind of so enchanted with the game, we forget that it's a game. It's just a game. You know, one of my sons went through basic training in the military. And he said, Mom, some of these guys are freaking out. You know, the trainers are, you know, off the wall, mean, obnoxious, whatever, you know, trying to break you. He said, but it's just a game. It's just a game. And I thought, this kid's brilliant. He's already figured out that none of this has to matter. It only matters if we make it important. And so once we begin to understand that, and this bridge between 3rd and 5th, I will share with you a channeled message that Sanat Kumar gave me a number of years ago. He said, the game is over, referring to 3D, the 3D game. And then he said, the game will end when there are no more players. So it's up to us to unhook from that polarity thing that we're always caught up in. And then he said, will you be the first to leave or the last? I'm out. And so what that means is if, you know, we don't need to keep score on people. We don't need to keep score on ourselves. Every day we just do better because we want to, not because we're worried we're going to get caught.
What would your advice be then, just briefly, to someone that's like, yeah, I want out of the game. Like, that's it. I want to move that direction. What do I do? What do I do? You know? Okay.
I'll give you 2 things to do. The first one is, when you go to bed, in addition to that little thing I told you, you would say, I'm waking up in 5D. And there is a real bedtime prayer in this book. So if you wanted to just go to that prayer, you could say the whole prayer. But if you just announce, I'm waking up in 5D. Okay. My prayer goes, I'm waking up in 5D and I wake up well rested no matter what the night holds. Because I remember tripping over toys. to get to a child that was, it needed something. The second thing I will tell you to do, and this is a morning thing, I am asking for a day of heaven on earth for me and everyone I come in contact with and everyone I am in contract with. So what that does is extends this beautiful energy of 5D, because heaven on earth and 5D are the same. So I'm asking for a day of heaven on earth for me and everyone I'm in contact with, that may be you, and everyone I'm in contract with. Well, maybe I don't talk to my webmaster every day, but I've got her butt covered. It's amazing what it does.
Beautiful. And those are in Beyond the Flower of Life book. Yeah.
Those prayers are in, no, they're in the Waking Up in 5D. My mistake.
Okay.
I misspoke. This book, Waking Up
Beautiful.
in 5D.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was only listening to a conversation last night while researching another podcast, and he spoke of he's like, yeah, I just imagine my arm's length field around me, that I'm in my kind of energetic field, and outside is just a Shakespearean play, and I choose which bit to enjoy at any given moment or take into my field, and I thought, yeah, that's exactly right.
Not only are we the actor in the play, but we're also the script writer.
Yeah.
And that, oh my gosh, that means I can change the players. Yeah, you can. What happens is when you make people less important, they are less important. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. Last question for you is, with everything we've covered today, what would you like to leave the listeners to ponder on?
I would like you, as a listener, to say to yourself, dear God, show me how much I'm loved. Or dear Source, whoever you want to pray to, show me how much I'm loved, and watch what happens. And so the power we hold is free will. Free will demands we ask. We get a clean slate every day. Why not use it?
Beautiful. And where can people find out more? Where's the best place? Your website, Maureen? I'll put the link in the show notes, but just say it out loud for everyone so they can come and check
My
it out.
website name is stgermainmysteryschool.com. And you can also just look up my name, Maureen St. Germain. It'll take you to the same place. I'm on the 5 social media channels. And also I'm on iTunes and Google Play on an app called Illuminate. And that's ILLUMINATE. And if it doesn't come up right away, put a space and then put my name, Maureen. And it's a little purple box. And it's got wisdom. It's got the higher self protocol. It's got maybe 30 or more guided meditations that I've written and recorded over the years. And some general information. And the app is free. And with the free version, you get 6 guided meditations. One of them was an award-winning first place meditation of the year award. But I put that on the free one because I want everyone to have it, because it opens up your channels to Source. And so the app is a really good tool to get started, because it's got a lot of good things, and you can have it right on your phone. You can there's 5-minute meditations, there's longer ones. So they're really wonderful.
Yeah, beautiful. And congratulations. I can appreciate it from a business perspective, what it would have taken to get all that off the ground. So
yeah,
amazing. Yeah, good.
yeah, I hear you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom today. And I enjoy bringing people on, having conversations like this, and just lifting humanity, exposing other people's work and getting it out there as much as possible. Because
thank you so much for having me.
We all need it. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Take care.